we should be live with the Lessons Learned podcast. Yeah, so those are our faces on the screen. Um, just do a little bit of producing job here is always interesting. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lessons Learned podcast. Hope everybody's doing well this mid-March, midweek day, Wednesday, Wednesday 13, not Friday the 13th, so we're dodging that bullet. This week we're gonna be talking about something that we sort of been talking on the edges for a very long time, but I think we're gonna focus on that, and that is how games are financed, right? Because I think it's more that's more of a point than whether or not video games are expensive, because cost of making video games is relative both within the industry, but also, you know, so if people can actually afford to make them, they would make them, right? And we see a lot of decisions that are made about video games and the trends in video games, but basically who has the money, because in capitalism, yes, I went there, because we do live in a society, he who has the gold makes the rules, or the yen, dollars, yuan, euros, pounds. Well, you get the picture. So, but before we do that, as always, we'll start with some news. And I want to start with this one because this is very interesting. Sega holds Judgment sales. Judgment is a game, a spin-off of the Yakuza series, in Japan following actor's arrest. Apparently.
Alleged cocaine use?
Yes.
Is that what it is? I just saw that right now.
Pierre Taki. By the way, it's not unusual for actors, Japanese and Chinese actors, to get Western or Western first names, but maintain their family name, their patronyms. Taki was arrested for alleged cocaine use, which, given Japanese extremely tough drug laws, could result in 7 years prison sentence. Wow. Reports detail that although no cocaine was found in the 51-year-old actor's home or vehicle, raided after a tip-off, Taki tested positive in the sample and admitted to having used a small amount of the drug. Essentially, it's Sega is basically sort of Taki has been the voice of a character there, and this is not the first time the Sega or the companies have done this. When one of their voice actors, who also tend to usually be the faces as well, so one of the games erased them.
I feel like something like that happened not too long ago.
It says here that it happened to. I think you look at it doesn't say, it doesn't give another example here. It does say that Disney also removed them on new and the sequel to of Kingdom Hearts 3, because he plays Olaf in Frozen, in the Japanese edition of the game, of course, And the thing about it is that this game has been around for a while, but it was slated to have a Western release, but of course that has been halted.
Well, yeah, it already came out from what I'm seeing, which is I mean, I don't care. Like I really don't. Like, in terms of this person's drug use, this is a game I would still play because it's the same makers from Yakuza, and I think it's interesting in terms of it's sort of the opposite of Yakuza. Instead of being like some part of like a former gang organization, you're like on the other side of the law.
Yeah.
And I was interested in playing this game, so I'm kind of disappointed that they might have halted.
Yeah, they may have to do some. They may have to do some reshooting of scenes and stuff like that, or they might not even release it in the States, right? They might just go like, you know what, it's too much trouble. We're not going to localize it. Yeah. Although supposedly they already have the English, tracks for this. So
they were going to dub it.
Yeah, they're going to dub it, of course. But the thing is, it's still his face on the character, right? They use motion capture and all that.
But is he like a primary character?
I think he plays one of the major bosses of the Tojo clan in its Yakuza.
Okay.
So That might have been something that there might be
I
more than
mean,
just one scene with him, right? So
yeah, and I mean that's the disappointing part. It's like, oh, like we won't get that because like I personally don't get it. Like I don't understand. It's like
yeah,
it, it, cocaine use, that's bad. Yeah, it's drug, like it's drug use. It's not necessarily something I agree with, but it's like I'm thinking there are worse crimes that like I would see this being better. I'm not going to name any worse crimes. You can all think of worse crimes than that. It's like yeah, yeah, it's something I want to encourage, but I don't see how buying this game would like encourage that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a thing. I think it's more of image than anything else, right? Especially to be
Mm-hmm.
Japan on this. Like the Japanese market, it's relatively smaller, but it's also in many ways more demanding because of it.
I guess
So
I can understand that it's a cultural
yeah,
difference, and
but
I may not agree with it or 100% understand it, but I get it. Or I may not get it, but I'm understanding of it.
yeah. In other news, we're going to have a release of the three Halo games remastered, including Halo 4, including Halo Reach for PC. And they're going to be on Steam as well as on Microsoft Store.
Yeah, which one I was actually just told this by a big Halo fan, and I'm like, I saw that I'm like, it's gonna be on Steam, really. It's kind of interesting that given how Microsoft is lacking in exclusives in terms of their Xbox, and they have been like pushing cross compatibility with when it comes to Windows and the Xbox, but usually that means that they limit those sales of these games in the Microsoft store. So it's interesting to see them post this on Steam.
I mean, they might just use Steam as a front store, but then might be a way like Ubisoft, you have to have their client in order to play the game, especially if you want to play online. So it's like, okay, you can buy on Steam. We have no problem with that. You know, they might put it, and it's like you can buy some Ubisoft games, and we can buy some Ubisoft games, and and in Origin and stuff like
Mm.
that. But you still have to use their client to play the game. So that might be a way that they want to, they want to popularize their client, but also grabbing if they really want to make this a PC centric stuff, and maybe they're capitalizing a little bit on the sort of Steam versus Epic and all the thing about it. It's like, no, we're still using the biggest platform out there, blah blah. And also it depends how much money. Change hands because these deals are not just, oh, we're just going to put it there. It's not as simple as that. At least not at the level of Microsoft and Valve. So there's that. But so yeah, I think that's pretty interesting.
It also kind of does go in line with Microsoft's push for, I think, what would you call it? It'd be like ease of access in terms of trying to get like a wide audience, as
Yeah.
we've been reporting that they've been partnering up with like Nintendo on not just making games cross or cross platform online connectivity, but also maybe even like putting Xbox games or making a streaming service available to Nintendo.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that's very interesting when it comes to that aspect. Um, Talking of stuff that's happening in other places, we have a couple of things that might be interesting. Epic is there's another Epic Store exclusive. XCOM like Phoenix Point will be an Epic Store exclusive for 1 year. It's very interesting that these exclusives are for 1 year. Now they're not truly exclusive. Like they're not like, oh, we want. Well, of course we'll sell it somewhere else, but for the first year, we're gonna have it on Epic Store only. XCOM creator Julian Gollop. Oh wow, yeah, Julian Gollop of the Gollop brothers were the original creators of the original XCOM back in the day. As announced, his new game is recently delayed and very XCOM-like Phoenix Point will be exclusive to the Epic Games Store in the first year of release. Golub said that the deal means that it's certain that it will be able to update and expand Phoenix Point for years to come. It's pretty interesting, and there's a video here on PC Gamer explaining why he did what he did. I'm going to put it up in the chat so everybody can see it. There you go. That's pretty. Specifically, the Phoenix Point will be Steam and GOG as well. I see technically true, but the episode exclusive is only for a year, so I suspect no one will be satisfied with that interpretation. So eventually they will put it somewhere else, right? As sales drop, I suppose. That they want to ride that initial sales on Epic. And then as, sales go down, the price goes down even further. Like, oh, by the way, GOG exclusive stuff like that. Talking about accessibility as well, the original Diablo is out on GOG for $10. At least that was the price that I saw the moment I saw it, and it seems to be selling very well there.
It's like did the original Diablo didn't require a client of any sort, did it?
No. It had a multiplayer, but basically multiplayer was a co-op multiplayer. But that was point to point. That's peer to peer, so it wasn't. You hosted someone in your feed, and it was dial up. So it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I remember those those early days, or those actually I guess late days of dial-up.
Sorry. It was Diablo 2 that used what became the Blizzard client for you to play again co-op. But that was a game that you did that. You didn't have to subscribe. You didn't have to be online back in the day. Those games you didn't have to be online to be on those games. But that started the trend, right?
Yeah,
many years ago.
And it's interesting that, well, first off, I'm like, it wasn't before. Mm-hmm. Second, it's interesting. I assume that you can buy Diablo 1 on
Blizzard, but if it's not properly updated, I mean, it's a game from the 1990s.
Yeah.
So Diablo 2, they did a patch about 2 years ago to keep it current, and now you can download it for free if you have the original CD key to activate it. So it's like, oh, you can get it, no problem. Of course, I'm not saying that you should do this, Chad, but there's a lot of counterfeit CD keys floating around there and CD key generators. So it's like, oh, yeah, sure. Let me find my old Jewel box about Diablo. Yeah, sure. Google CD. I'm not saying you should do this, by the way. I'm just saying that's how it works. Yes. Oh, it's right there. It's my screen saying, yeah, oh, sure. Yeah, here I go.
Or you can just go to like a used any place thrift shop, just happen to find find a jewel case and just take a picture of the key that's on the back of the jewel case.
Yeah. So that's it. So I hope it's not the complete edition because Diablo originally had an expansion. I thought about buying it, but it was like I actually got the Diablo 2 expansion. I did manage to find. I think it's Diablo 2, but without the major expansion. And I started playing it. It was like, okay, I like the memories, but I sort of have outgrown, I think, the loot mill kind of situation like that. That's why I started playing Diablo 3 and just stopped because it was like, I don't really care for it. So, yeah. But for people who never played Diablo or want to go back into what it is, I would warn you that the movement in that game is pretty janky. It's like you can almost see the squares of the characters run. I mean, characters can run, but they don't. For example, there's no, horizontal. There's vertical, horizontal, but there's no, I would say, lateral movement. So you're moving and you're moving. You move like this, right? You don't move sideways, it can be pretty janky. All the animations for the era are pretty smooth, and the story is pretty basic. It's this big dungeon, and go and kill all the things in dungeons. You get to the bottom, and you kill Diablo, and you're done. Mm-hmm. So spoilers for what 30-year-old game. Yeah, so
20.
Yeah, 20 plus. Well, actually, yeah. So there you go. Talk about Epic. There's an interview with him on PC Gamer. that was by Sean Prescott, Epic CEO. The only way to display Steam is with exclusives, good prices, and better revenue sharing. Team Sweeney anticipates great changes for Nintendo in the next 5 years. Like we said before, we have talked about this. Epic Team Sweeney is making a very big push, to challenge, if not take down Valve. And considering the Valve has been in problems lately, again, for amongst other things, hosting a game called the rape game, something like that.
Yeah, rape dates or something like that.
Which was all about a post-apocalyptic survivor who gets to rape women in zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. Something dumb like that. Yeah, that was an entire controversy. It seems that, again, Steam didn't really much care about that until the media got on it and they're like, we're gonna pull it now.
Yeah. On complaints that the Epic Store doesn't have all the features that Steam has, and as a reminder, Steam took the original Steam store was basically a spreadsheet, like literally it was a yellow and gray page with bands like this game. That's all the Steam was, and it was horrible back. I remember having to install the original Steam in order to play Half-Life, because they repackaged Half-Life, so you had to have Steam connectivity. You had an offline mode, but most of the time the offline mode didn't work. That's why I didn't. That's why I think one of the reasons why I switched to consoles for a while was I didn't want to deal with stuff like from Steam, because I could see that more and more games are going to do that. But this is response. I think it's nearly perfect for consumers already. Talk about the Epic Store. There's no hope of displacing a dominant storefront only by adding marginally more store features or a marginally better install experience, he said. This is Epic, Mr. Sweeney, Tim Sweeney. These battles will be won on the basis of game supply, consumer prices, and developer revenue sharing. That gets your foot on the door, and they certainly have kicking the door. But I think long term, it also becomes a thing about we talk about the ecosystem, and if people feel more comfortable in Steam, then they'll stay in Steam even with all the headaches, right? And and I made the mistake of reading the PC Gamer comment section on the Facebook page, and people will make ridiculous defenses for Steam. So it has a dedicated following. So if you cannot match them in that sense. Although I'm sure that as time goes by, they'll put more and more features and make it more accessible. They'll have to, the newness of having a couple of new games or exclusives is not gonna work. And I also, like I said, I predict that eventually what you're gonna have is somebody's gonna come along and is gonna make a client aggregator if it already doesn't exist. Like somebody's gonna be smart. It's like, wait a minute, what if I create a super engine that will aggregate GOG, Steam, Epic, Origin, and you can put your passwords there, and you just click one button and go and do that. I mean, if it's not out there already, and chat, please, if you're watching this right now or later on YouTube, please let me know, because it makes perfect sense that as we see more and more digital storefronts, we are gonna see these aggregators, right? And I think then it's what's going to be, and this is just my prediction, who either gets the if Epic, for example, because we've already seen, for example, linking your account, Microsoft account or Ubisoft account to Steam, or GOG with Steam and stuff like that, third-party users. If Epic decides, oh, fine, we're not only going to have exclusive, we're going to aggregate everybody under our banner, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go to Humble and get your credit card information and all that with that. You can go here and do that, right? If they can do that, kind of like a self-contained, what was it? What we call it?
It's almost like a Trillion, which Trillion was for instant messages.
Yeah,
like an instant message aggregator.
Yeah,
back when work. Those were pretty big.
And that would solve the problem that having your library split, because you just click one button and that's it, right? I expect that somebody's already working on that. Okay, and things, for example, I think the game business will change more in the next 5 years than the past 10. The last remnants of the old retail model of gaming are falling apart, and the biggest successes are fast-moving indies and fast-moving big competitors, exemplified by Fortnite and Apex Legends. All the old decisions need to be revisited. While I agree with that last one sentence, I don't see that as a good sign. Everybody moving to make the next big game. But of course, one of the reasons why he can Team 20 can launch his Epic Store is because of all the money that Fortnite is making. So, kind of like what happened with Valve and Half-Life 2 and those games and the Valve engine. So, yeah, we'll see if that lasts. Talking about people making games, there's rumblings that Google is ready to announce something maybe as early as next month. For example, Jade Raymond has joined Google. The company is expected to reveal its gaming interest next week, not next month, next week. Jade Raymond, and let's see who. She will serve as the vice president of the company, presumably vice president, working on the game's interest. Raymond worked at Ubisoft as a producer and then as an executive producer on the first two Assassin's Creed games, as well as Splinter Cell, Blacklist, and Watch Dogs. Before moving to Electronic Arts to work on several Star Wars projects, she left EA in October. And with that also, there's been a patent people have been digging around for a new Google controller. What they shown doesn't look great, but it could be just a prototype, right?
Yeah.
It looks like a throwback to the 1990s, instead of Sega-like controller, with way too many buttons and not very it's like the worst features of a PS1 controller and a Sony controller, right? So
yeah,
it doesn't look great. I'll put. I think I have the link to that, so you guys can see it.
Oh my god! I'm sorry. Those colors look. It's branding. It's really good branding.
Yeah.
But the colors look like pretty terrible together.
It looks to me like a cheap knockoff. That's what it looks to me.
It does.
It looks like I can go to CVS right now and buy one of those Atari, Sega cheap consoles, or imitation consoles. That's what it looks like. And also, who puts? I mean, even Sony has realized you got to put more distance on your controllers, and you have to have triggers. It looks like it doesn't have any triggers. It has shoulder buttons.
Maybe two shoulder buttons.
Yeah, two shoulder buttons. Two shoulder buttons. A very big. People don't use this anymore.
Oh no, it does have trigger. Like it has two trigger buttons in the back. I'm looking at the picture of the patent.
Oh, okay.
So it has two shoulder buttons, the right and left, and then like two trigger buttons.
Because from the angle I'm looking at, it looks like.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it shows anything.
Yeah, it still looks. And there's also a reason why you put something like X or letters and stuff like that, because you want people to quickly press the buttons regardless of language. Also, this is a very big what you might call it, not a. What's a little cross here? God damn it, I forgot the name of it. It puts the onus not on the analog sticks, but somewhere else. It doesn't have like a Google Speech thing. You can talk to your controller.
It looks like it. It has a Google button. Mm-hmm. So this looks like a PlayStation 4 controller without the touchpad, and except so it has a home button, which looks like it would be your start, and then like the weird 3 lines on a cell phone that looks like it'd be a select. You got the big G, so that'd be like your PlayStation home button, but then there's the extra button that looks like a microphone that's supposed to be like a push to talk thing, or maybe like, hey Google, look it up. Yeah. So this immediately tells me that this is a controller for a cell phone. Like, this is something that you're supposed to pair up with your phone and then play.
Well, we talked about how they were testing their streaming technology back in 2018, so perhaps that's what they want to do?
Mm-hmm. So I don't think this is going to be part of like a Steam, like a stream box of any sort, like the ones that Google pretty much discontinued a couple months ago. So I think this is going to be like a peripheral for a phone.
Yeah, so we'll see. Probably we might get some announcement in E4. I mean, if they work in E3, sorry, I don't know what E4 is. E3, perhaps, maybe. I mean, if they're working for next week, that might be a more of a teaser than
yeah. E4 is the bootleg knockoff of E3.
Yeah,
it's trying to be better, but it's somehow worse.
Let me see when this came out. This news, March. Oh yeah, yes. Oh, talking about E3, and other shows. Gearbox seems to be teasing Borderlands appearance for PAX East, which is before E3. So there's March 28, Boston, Massachusetts, which is later on this month. And by the look of it, it's going to be Borderlands. Are they trying to capitalize on on the fact that people are looking at Outer Worlds and go like, "Oh, that looks like a cool Borderlands game"?
A better like a cross between Borderlands and Fallout.
Yeah. According to this from Game Informer, and I'll read the paragraph, the one I'm interested in. It's possible that this is in Borderlands, but it feels like asking for people to be incredibly mad at some pretty heavily misleading teasing. And this is a teaser, by the way. They're just teasing stuff. And the possibility is an off-rumored Borderlands remaster, another remaster. Okay, I'm going to say this. I played the original Borderlands, and I think that was the game that really sort of went like, oh, okay, now I know why I don't like this. I went from like tolerating or even liking loot mills type games, looter shooters, where you want to call them. You call them loot mill for all the types because fantasy games work in the same manner. To going like, yeah, I don't like this anymore because it's that's Borderlands is like, oh, you get this purple, and then 50 minutes later, oh, you got this gray that's better than your purple and has the numbers, but that was like, no.
I have tried I tried the original Borderlands. I see why people enjoyed it, but it's not the game for me. It pushes like multiplayer stuff, and then a bunch of like I had the same issue with the loot as well, and then it's just like infinite respawns. I couldn't get into the story. The world seemed okay, but the story I couldn't really get into.
It doesn't really have much of a story other than find the vault.
Yeah,
and you go from what's described by one reviewer as you go from one junkyard to another junkyard to another junkyard. There's some cool things, but I think the second game tried to polish it and really introduce characters and stories and stuff like that. But by that time, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to go into that.
Yeah, and then of course it when I played it, I was trying to play with friends, but then it would always get to the point where like I had to go to school or work or something, and my friends who weren't going to school or work would just get ahead of me, and it's like I'm falling behind. It's the same MMO RPG thing, and so I just couldn't get into it because it does push for multiplayer.
And then of course you have Randy Pitchford, which one could argue Borderlands doesn't suffer from Randy Pitchfordness, but it's kind of associated with him. I'm like, how unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned something like this, but you're probably going to like this. Hollow Knight is getting a physical edition.
I saw that last night. It's like, that's interesting. I haven't played Hollow Knight, but it's been one of those things like that looks like the art style looks fantastic. The gameplay looks okay. It's one of those that I'm like, this may or may not be the gameplay like mechanics for me, but the setting looks interesting. The characters, the art style looks very interesting. And like that's something I would kind of consider getting if it wasn't like I think the special edition is like $60-$70. It's a bunch of neat stuff, but like if I'm going to commit that much to a special edition, it's got to be like a game that I already know I enjoy.
Well, it's going to come out for PC, PS4, and Switch. No, not Xbox. The prices here are $29 for the PS4 and PC copies, and $34 for Switch players. The collector edition will cost $64 for PS4 and PC, and $69 for Switch owners. But then Switch games are notoriously a little more expensive because of the media they have to use, but not by much. It doesn't seem to hurt their sales at all. But no Xbox release for this. They had canceled retail physical release for Hollow Knight before, but then they came back with this. So, for people who are looking for physical copy, and of course Switch games, a lot of them do have physical copies because people want to carry it around and there might be good internet connection to want to play the game. So that's one thing. So really, I think on the Switch is going to be the one that's going to sell a lot. But people who want their own Hollow Knight, and friend of the channel, Huckleberry, I watch him play it, and it's a very charming, beautiful game. Really, doesn't really have a lot of dialogue per se. It has text here and there. I don't know if it's my type of game because it's a platformer, and I'm not very good at platformers. But
the Metrovania parts where it kind of gets me. It's like, it's like if it's like Mega Man and stuff. Like I'm not very good at those games.
Yeah. Here another talk about news and stuff. By way of Inside Gaming, I went to Game Informer and the interview with Glenn Schofield on leaving Call of Duty and Activision. This was on March 8th, but I came by it for Inside Gaming, so I'll give you the interview so you can, see it for yourself. I'll put it on the chat. So you can evaluate that for yourselves. But the thing the Inside Gamer kind of took out of this was... Actually, it was in Game Informer podcast, and this is the announcement, the link to it. One of the things was essentially he had a project that he wanted to pitch, but that wasn't Call of Duty, but Activision said no. And it was interpreted by Inside Gamer saying essentially, it's Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty all the time. Call of Duty all the time, all the time, all the time. Because that's what makes them money, right? And they're not really interested. Although they also quoted, I think, was the current president of Activision saying, yeah, new IP is risky. And we're not about here to take no risk.
Oh, I think is this by the same person that created Dead Space? Because I thought I saw somebody like saying the creator of Dead Space would like to make another Dead Space game that pretty much negates the second and the third game and just makes a direct sequel. I don't think Glenn Close has ever
worked on that. Let me. He worked with Visceral. He was working in Visceral. So
because I saw this at the.
Oh yeah, he worked on Dead Space. Yeah, but the EA Visceral and the creator executive producer in the third person horror game Dead Space. Yes, you are correct. He was co-founder of Sledgehammer Games. Is the general manager co-founder of Sledgehammer Games. What is Sledgehammer Games working on? Call of Duty. Visceral, he's working on two major developers, Sledgehammer and Call of Duty, and Visceral. So for EA and Activision. So if you want the inside scoop on those two companies, that's probably a good podcast to listen. With a dollop, of course, of ass covering and not burning bridges because he's still in the industry. But essentially, what I've gathered from this is I wasn't very happy that he was not given the freedom to really develop his own stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to start touching upon our main topic. But I see, we kind of see this. It's like it's weird. So you have this. It's almost like he's been on both ends. He's worked on a major franchise, the Call of Duty franchise for Activision. They want to try something new, or he has a new idea that he thinks might make a great game, and of course they pull it out, say no. And then, but he's also been on the opposite end where they're like, "Hey, EA, can we try like this? We have this new kind of niche idea for like a space horror game that they gave him a chance." I don't think Dead Space got very much marketing because it's one of those like it was a niche game, and then surprise, it was a big hit. And then guess what happened? They're like, it's a cash cow. Let's start milking it. and then let's start pushing like this discussing these horrible ads for like, oh no, your mom's not gonna like this game, and just these
Yeah.
cringeworthy advertising, cringeworthy spin-off material. You got spin-off small video games, you got spin-off comics, you got spin-off terribly animated movies, and it's like, oh, but now we got to make it not niche anymore, and we got to make it appeal to a mass market so we can get more money out of it.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
then,
Oh yeah. The games that you actually don't talk about actually succeed most of the time.
yeah, like you look at Apex.
Talking about Apex, it seems again from Inside Gaming that Apex Legends is infected with cheaters and hackers. Oh dear. I tried last week. We were watching. I tried a little bit of Apex. It wasn't for me. Mostly because I'm lousy. Actually, I didn't actually get to shoot anybody and kill them, which I think was frustrating. That was the part that was frustrating. Not that I was dying. It was like I was shooting people. It was like, I'm dead. I was like, am I not doing the thing when I'm killing? No, I'm not killing anybody. So I was like, okay, this is not for me. You know. So now I'm playing Tyranny, which is pretty ultra hard game. But there you go. And I'm gonna play Sekiro Shadows Die twice. So that's gonna be an all ultra hard game. And I'm gonna die a lot, but at least I feel like with the games where you have a sword, you can actually hit the guy, and it kind of feels like you can see the numbers go down, the meters, but not with Apex, at least not for me.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's like,
well, at least the one positive thing you can say is that you tried it for free, and you
yeah,
didn't it cost you $60 or even like $20 to try and find out that this game is not for you.
Far Cry. Yeah. Bless you. Talking about other EA games, Anthem, because of course we want to talk about Anthem having also problems. Anthem has multiple problems with gear, and the last version of this little problem is, and also boycotts as well, reported by PC Gamer 19 hours ago. So this is relatively fresh, about yesterday. Yeah. Anthem players discover removing gear makes you more powerful, and also how to have infinite health. Yeah.
Really? That's also seems to tie with like the story earlier this week that your starter weapon is somehow more powerful than like any other weapon in the game.
And also they fix a bug that made it easier and faster to get more gear, more randomized gear. Especially,
I guess like better crafting materials.
Yeah, and no, I think also the drops also were more.
Yeah,
you get more often. You got drops more often, just for playing as opposed to for
like
paying.
rarer drops.
Yeah, and because the thing about the rifle is that the basic rifle has fixed stats. Every other piece of gear, most pieces of gears are randomized, and that means that it's you can get the next piece could be the best gun you ever had, or it could be far worse than that you have. And when you get to end game, it's like, oh, you randomize. Most of the stuff is crap. And of course, Anthem has microtransactions, which means you could pay to get the kind of gear that you want. But
I don't think you can pay to get like the best weapon or anything.
No. But you do have you still cosmetics and the like. But it's only cosmetics. Sorry, I misspoke. At least so far, I'm only surprised that it will be that way. But it's like, oh, I get a cosmetic for a gun that is crappy, that worst type of loot. So around all of this, and a couple of people have been talking about it, Young Ye among them, is that some Anthem players are organizing a boycott. Now, boycotts in video games are notorious for not working at all. But that was before the days of the always online, eternal engagement, games as service, as my poor imitation of Jim Sterling goes there, in which, in that case, boycotts can actually work, as they did for the game For Honor. About 2 years ago, players discovered that you had to spend something like $700 to get all the stuff, right? And that the progression system to to get the the randomized loot, not randomized loot, but the that's what I call it, the cosmetics, was painfully slow, thus encouraging people to pay extra money to get ahead, not to get in the game, but get to what they want, and they decided to boycott. Right, it's like we're not gonna play. They're gonna do what's called a blackout. We're not gonna play a day or a week or whatever. We're not gonna play these games forever, right? Not forever, but for a few days. Guess what happens? The key, of course, is engagement. If your players are not playing, they're also not buying.
Yep.
Oops. So if enough people playing Anthem, and they don't have to be huge numbers, but if enough people in Anthem go for a day or two, or maybe a week, we're not gonna play this game. We'll come back to it later. There's two things that can happen. First of all, is that if that would have happened, you're not getting revenue because several hundred, several thousand people, especially if they're the whales, right? Actually, because of the way things are structured, if the people doing the blackout are the people who pay the most money, then that's really you can have thousands of players, millions of players, but if that 5%, 10% are the ones who are not, even a significant portion of that 5% says we're going to have a blackout, then they're not paying money. You're not getting that revenue. You're not getting your money, honey. And it's like, oh, and not only that, it's like, oh, I'm not playing, but I like to play something. Oh, look, Apex Legends. It's free. Yeah. Oh, Fortnite. It's free. Oh, this other game came out. I'm going to start playing that. Like, oh, you want to go back to Anthem? Yeah, well, I'll finish Sekiro. I'll get back to you. Oh, I never played For Honor. I'm going to play that instead, right? They drift away and they don't come back. And so it might be effective this time around because the games demand you to be always playing them like a shore. So.
Or even the other thing too is I saw like an argument where a lot of people, the people who would be active and not as many potential players are as active on like Reddits and stuff where this boycott's being announced. But the thing is, if enough people don't stop playing, that means that it's going to get harder to find players to play with for the other people who may not even be aware of the boycott, or you can't find people to play with, or it takes longer to find people. They might just stop playing out of frustration. Well, no one's on, so I'm not going to play. And of course, word of mouth, like this Anthem game, like nobody's playing it, and experience sucks, so it spreads. It has that potential.
And I think we're gonna go, before we actually jump into the subject of today, two pieces of news for the upcoming Electronic Expo, also known as E3 2019. PlayStation, Sony, by way of PlayStation, is skipping E3 2019 completely. It's the first time in the show's 24-year history. So even when people were walking away, this is not the first time companies have walked away from. Nintendo has done it before, and there was the show got suspended by about 3 years, I think. But even then, when it was on, Sony has been in there. They're not doing it. Sony and PlayStation brand will not have a presence E3 2019, independent from company confirmed Thursday to Polygon. As the industry evolves, Sony Interactive Entertainment continues to look for inventive opportunities to engage the community. PlayStation's fans mean the world to us, and we always want to innovate, think differently, experiment with new ways to delight gamers. Okay, don't get angry with us. We love you still. As a result, we have decided not to participate in E3 in 2019. We're exploring new and familiar ways to engage in our community in 2019 and can't wait to share our plans with you. Wow. So, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they could come back, and they probably will come back in 2020 if they have a new, something big to announce, but not in 2019.
Well, there's also EA that's sort of kind of not being active at
they're skipping the press conference, which is the big presentation. EA says there will be less talk and more play at ePlay 2019 event this year. It will not host a press conference. We're skipping the press conference years and replacing it with multiple live streams that will air during the first 2 days of the event, bring you more of what you told us you want, more gameplay insights from the teams making the games. More live streams. Oh, dear. Oh, more influencers.
Well, they say developer, so what I'm getting is sort of like a vibe of I would assume it's going to be something like that Command and Conquer mobile game that they kind of announced, except ideally it's a game that people actually care about, but just have like, people playing it and at the same time while developers are talking about it and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's going to be it, and it's we've seen kind of the evolution of the oh yes, we're developer. Hey, you're playing the game. Oh yeah,
yeah, I'm totally playing this game.
Yeah, so and
look how much fun I'm playing.
Yeah,
and how good I am.
So there's that. But one of the things, and we said it many times before in this program, is that E3, it's sort of the epitome of the stuff we're going to be talking a lot. That's very expensive. I think that's one of the reasons why Nintendo pulled out when the Wii U wasn't doing well for them. It's like, listen, it's not working for us, right? It's just we're spending millions of dollars on advertising, and it's getting us nowhere. But with the Switch, they came back to a degree. Nintendo is sort of halfway in E3, but it's become more and more optional for them than necessary. So we'll see. And I have my itchy nose. Which I think, talking now about money, we get to the subject of the day. And the subject of the day is financing video games. What does it take to pay for video games? We're going to do a survey of different things. We're going to talk about crowdsourcing and early access and microtransactions and all that. And investors and public companies and private and all that, and developer, publisher stuff. So we're going to do a light thing. But what I really want to do is sort of touch into these things and see the strengths and weaknesses, what we like, what we don't like, and also remark on the fact that it seems that, and when we talk about it, is that it seems that when you look at many of the stories of video game studios, especially developers, and sorry, that was still itchy, and game failing and problems or decisions that people don't like, it all comes back to not simply making money, but how do you finance? How do you get the money to make the game in the first place? Because the argument is, we can't, games are getting more and more expensive every year. Okay, fine. But we've seen those trends. We've seen movies get more expensive every year, stuff like that. And we've seen other forms of media get more expensive. That doesn't certainly mean that people have stopped making movies or TV or any forms of media, and thousands of games, I'll argue tens of thousands of games get made every year. So it's more of financing. And for more information on this, I think you should make a couple of stuff. One of them should be Nerdslayer channel on YouTube and his investigative series on different, mostly MMOs. But again, you'll find that watch them, you'll see that time and time again, developers and their products simply either don't find enough funding or maybe get too much from certain sources, and then they're forced to do certain things. So we're going to talk all about this. Let's start with, sorry about this. My nose. Itchy. Let's start with one of the least favorite of mine, early access. Early access is the idea that we're going to, and this was started with Steam and now spread to other parts of the video game industry. GOG has an early access program. I think Microsoft certainly has a program as well. Sony.
And then, of course, I think the other thing, too, is that video game AAA people are kind of they're essentially putting out early access games without calling them early access. I mean, you call Anthem an early access game, I think.
Yeah, betas, obvious betas. But I think let's talk about the classic early access. The idea behind early access is, as the title goes, where this is why I don't like it. It's an implied promise, like, hey, we're making this game. We're not done yet, but there's enough of this game that I think you guys might enjoy. If you want to support this game and see it finished, buy what we have now at a lower price, I suppose. Usually, maybe, but lower, and you get in there first. And entire genres of games, especially the survival horror genre, before got taken over by and even the battle royale genre started like that. Like, we're just gonna play this early access. But the thing is, it's early access. It's basically clearly a beta, or even an alpha in some cases, right? Depending on the game. So you're paying for the privilege of, how can I say that? You're paying for the privilege of playing a beta. in the hopes that the finished version will be different enough to be
Yeah.
worth rebuying, or you're gonna get a leg up on people who waited.
Usually if you get like an early access, I think you get the full game.
Yeah, you get the full game, but it's like by that time you play the game already, so
Yeah, you've already played it, so it's either been improved or sometimes it could be completely overhauled and something different than when when you first played it.
yeah.
You may or may not like that.
Yeah, and it basically means, and this one of the two ways that financing is sort of a public financing, like so public in the sense of leading to the wider public, whether it's Kickstarter or crowdfunding. It isn't really crowdfunding in the sense that only you're not making a wide solicitation of money, right? But it's similar. One of the problems, and also crowdfunding has this. The problem is like if they don't make enough money, the game, so few people play it, doesn't go anywhere, which just happens when you don't have enough money.
Or it could even make enough money and they just choose not to continue anymore for whatever reason.
There's no real impetus for them to release the full game. In fact, many of the games have been sort of crapped out the door. Oh, it finally got a release after 2-3 years of being played. People been playing it. It's because population has gone down or something like that, and like, well, so for every game that has been successful, there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of games that have never been there or stayed, almost have lived and died in early access and never gone anywhere. And I don't feel I should pay for the privilege of, for an incomplete game, right? Mm-hmm. And it also encouraged the idea of incomplete games, blah, 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 which is the problem we talked about before. Crowdfunding. Crowdfunding seemed like a couple of years ago, about 5-6 years ago, it's like, oh, the alternative to big, going and selling your company to a big developer. You got a bunch of people funding the game, and it's for the fans and nostalgia, and these games are great, and blah blah blah. Well, after a while, scams have been people have been scammed out of their money. Crowdfunding like Kickstarter makes no promises that you're gonna get delivered any product anytime. You're an investor without any investor's rights. So you can end up with no game, or you can end up with a game that never comes out. Star Citizen, which has been sold in bits and pieces, but one of the most successful crowdfunding games. In fact, over $200 million have been so far in the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years. I think this game has been around. But they keep adding stuff. There's also bloat, right? Either they promise too much or they try to put too much stuff in it. Star Citizen, and it's like, when are you gonna finish this game, right? Oh, we keep getting money, so I guess we have to put more features. Mm-hmm. And
I think one of the most recent ones that comes to mind is that remake of, I think it's sort of supposed to be a remake of
Mega Man.
Oh, what? No, not BioShock. System Shock. System Shock 1. I've heard like the presentation looked good and people were hyped for it. It made way more than it needed to. And then they started pretty much changing everything about it that made it System Shocky. And they're like, oh, now we get these new assets and stuff. And it honestly looks so generic. Like some of the screenshots they were releasing, it looked almost like Prey. Wow. Like you could probably confuse it like for Prey. And then I think they kind of decided, you know what, like, we got way too carried away. So now we're scrapping everything again and trying to go back to our original vision. Making it look like System Shock and not some generic Unreal Engine game.
Mm-hmm. And I think it works well if you have because I know I talk to developers, especially developers of the Shadowrun series, some of the developers. If you have a very specific, limited view of what you want to do, this is what I want to do, this is what we've done, and you build from there. Like, for example, the Shadowrun series started with essentially a very simple game, but pretty cool game, very linear, Shadowrun Returns, and they worked their way up to Shadowrun Hong Kong. And I played all the games in the channel back to back, and they're pretty good. And you can see the evolution of that. Battletech game happened as well, was pretty good. and now they have a DLC which I should play, and they're gonna release more DLC. Although now they're owned by Paradox, which we'll talk about, getting bought out and all that as a thing. But they work relatively well, right? And especially when you work with a free engine like the Unity engine and stuff like that, if you have people who know what they're doing, then great. But if you go like on pure nostalgia, or it's like, oh, we're gonna do whatever and we can do everything, and either they don't get the money because people have no idea what they're trying to do, or or it just comes out, or it just gets bloated. And so crowdfunding has the problems. I think it's limited indie developers or small developers can still benefit from it, but it's not for everyone. And most of the time, even when they do get crowdfunding, it's not pure crowdfunding. Some people believe that, for example, they make all their profit from crowdfunding, and that's not what crowdfunding is. You're not supposed to make you're not supposed to make your profit from crowdfunding. You're supposed to make the game with, it's an investment scheme, so you get money from the game from crowdfunding, and then you make the profit from the game, right?
You're essentially, it's almost like, hey, here's a demo. I as a consumer would like to see this game as a full finished product. Here's some startup money. Finish this game. I gave you enough to where you think that once you're done, you give me a free copy of the game. There we go. That's pretty much all it is. But they're not going to make any money off of me because I already gave them the startup money, which they then in turn use to make the game. All that money spent.
I think it also works when you have a good reputation of already, right? Because some of the things about crowdfunding, especially with Kickstarter, is that so many companies, so many games have failed completely. There be some scams, there be lawsuits and all that. That you got to have good reputation. If you don't, at least in the video game space, I think for board games and anything like that, it still works very well for them. But when it comes to video games, if you don't have a good reputation of making good games and you have this limited but delivering smaller, tighter experiences, then it's gonna fail for you, because people are like, okay, we're willing to give you $1 or 100 or 1,000, how much money any one person is willing to give the first time around, but then the second or third time, like, nope, we learned our lesson. Not you, anybody but you.
Yeah, and there's been some good success stories, like Undertale is a major one, but like a studio that usually crowdfunds a lot of the game is Larium Studios, the makers of the Divinity franchise. They put out really good products afterwards, and they maintain a lot of that support even after the product is complete.
Yeah. So, but you have to have the right balance of product, reputation, and scale. If you don't,
and I remember the first time I backed up their Kickstarter for the original Divinity Original Sin, the first Original Sin game. They made enough money to where they were going to put day-night cycles, but then they realized, like, halfway through development, like, this isn't something we can really do, because it's essentially making a second game, like giving people patterns and stuff, so it'd be kind of a waste of resources.
Yeah,
they explained that, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Well, someone is like, oh, we got the money, so yeah, sure, let's try it, and they waste all the money, and they don't. And also, again, without reputation, you can't make the next game and the next game. You can make one successful game, but you don't make the other games. Then you have the traditional publisher / developer, right, where you have a developer. I mean, there's two types of publisher-developer relationship. There's the strictly, name-wise, it's like, we have a game and we're looking for a developer, and they spend the money. What they finance is, what used to finance putting games in boxes, essentially. Creating the Yule disc, the cartridges, the tapes, etc., putting in boxes and doing the advertising, right? Which is expensive now more than ever with stuff like E3, which is bad, which is enough. But now it's gone into two other stages, and the second stage, the more common stage now, is we have a game, we go to a publisher, and the publisher says, okay, we're going to give you money to make that game, whether it's exclusive deals like Microsoft, or exclusive for Microsoft and Sony doing PlayStation, Nintendo rescuing Bayonetta, right? Without that game would have been made. So on one hand, you can get games like crowdfunding that you wouldn't get otherwise, especially if platform holders. I think this is more successful when we talk about consoles and looking for exclusivity. And PC, well, I guess Epic is sort of kind of may get into that in the future. I see them trying that in the hand as well. So I say to build their own stable because they're going for exclusivity. Might as well just pay out hand to get made games for the Epic Store, right? But for the most part, it's give us money. But here's like, and this is a problem throughout most of the stuff with crowdfunding is he who has the goal makes the rules. You might come to them saying, "Oh, I have this one single player space adventure game," and it's like, "Yeah, but are you gonna have multiplayer?" It's like, "Well, we really haven't considered." Oh, you're gonna have microtransactions. Maybe, I suppose. I don't know. Are you gonna have this? You're gonna have that, and then the game gets transformed, or you end up with a successful game. We talked about Visceral Games and Dead Space. And then it's like, oh, you have a successful game, which means you have a successful IP, which means we can buy you. And then they get bought by the publisher. They get absorbed into the publisher fold, get wholly owned by the publisher, and then they're stuck making Call of Duties for the games for until the president just quits outright, goes like, I'm out of here, right? And also they are. On one hand, the benefit of that is, especially when you get bought out, is that while you're in the good graces of the publisher, you're getting a steady paycheck, right? You don't have to worry about the money coming in because they're going to pay for the money. They're going to pay for keeping the lights on. The other forms is like, well, we don't get the crowdfunding. We'll have to just move to a small office or just everybody's fired because we don't have the money, right? It just doesn't work. But you have a boss,
can't
right?
afford to hire like the staff or get the equipment that you need.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that publisher needs. The thing is, the publisher, when they acquire a developer, they mostly do it for the IP, and it's very easy to separate the developer from the IP. We've seen it before. We've seen IP being shared by Call of Duty. Now there's like half a dozen publishers, developers doing Call of Duty Studios doing that. Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, stuff like that, right? They just farm them out, right? And whatever original vision you had for it, or the people that were there that knew how to make this game, they're gone, or they're spread across the winds, or whatever. It's like, you lose that proficiency of making that particular game. And if things go sour, the first thing that gets cut is indeed not simply firing employees, it's literally entire studios get cut out. It's like, oh, well, we don't need Visceral anymore. Out you go.
BioWare Montreal.
Or get reorganized and stuff like that. And so, it's... And that brings me to another point. I think we're going to go to the last format. And it's many of these games, the publishers... The big publishers are publicly traded companies. And in the current market, their investors require them not only to make money, but to make increasing amount of money constantly, right? Constant growth. And if you cannot promise that, and that's where I think that's where the risk really comes from. It isn't that they don't have money right now to take risk. It's that if they take risk and those risks don't pay off, their investors will punish them. And then you end up with Activision losing 50% of their stock price in a couple of weeks or a couple of days, depending how you measure it, weeks to months, right? Because even their state franchises. The other problem, of course, is innovation. They're going to play it close to the vest. Once they have an IP, they're going to try to milk it for as much as possible. They're going to make decisions that are not even good for the individual games. They're going to focus test a lot because they want to make sure that the game sells. And for anybody who's been in an office, held an office job, one of the problems that you have is once you have a new boss changes the way things work. Office politics are very important. And the people who were once in charge of as solo developers, now they have to answer to someone else and their demands, right? And it almost always becomes a situation which is untenable unless you have a very, distant relationship where you kind of go like, okay, are you going to write me the check? Yes or no? How much? Okay, fine. And we do the thing, and that's the end of that. And it's like a handshake with like, as long as you give me something that's profitable, we're fine. But we're not in that situation anymore. But talking about investors, I think the last part is developers who want to self-publish, right, and are doing so in the double and triple A spaces, because indie games can kind of get away with it in a sense, even though Steam is a mess. Although Epic seems to be encouraging a lot of indie, and GOG is available and stuff like that, and that's outside investors, right? Companies who are just investing and buying pieces of your property, as it were, right? Who are not publishers. They're all there just to get an investment and to get a return, right? They are publicly traded companies, but you're not, and they own a percentage of you, and you may have one or more. And we've seen this, I think, what was Telltale Games, right? How they try to get funding and get more and more and more funding, right? Again, the situation is now you're faced with the direct pressure to deliver something, anything.
Yeah, it almost seems like with Telltale's, it's sort of like they were trying to like sell themselves, like like sell their services, like, hey, you give us some money, we can give you a product that's exclusive to you, kind of, sort of like with the Netflix thing. And it seemed like they were trying to do the same for, was it Lionsgate Studios or something, some movie studio thing. But you know what I kind of think about, it's like, can you sort of do video games like a traditional business, like go to the bank and be like, hey, I want to start a game studio, and here's my presentation, that's why you should give me startup money so I can start up a game studio. And
it used to be that way back in the 80s, sort of, right? Silicon Valley, you could go drive down to San Francisco, like, hey, American bank, or whatever bank you can find, mainstream bank, San Francisco, hey, give me $1.5 million, right? Or get a bunch of friends that are already in the industry and go like, hey, can we get our money together? But I think it's
ask your rich uncle.
Your rich uncle
give you a startup loan.
Yeah, but I think the problem is it isn't so much the overall cost. I think it's the volatility.
Yes.
It's like video games do still have a reputation to be sort of drive-by night kind of situation, and also, someone who doesn't understand how video games work. Like, okay, how are you gonna? Oh, you're just gonna sell this, and you gotta how to pitch it like a movie, stuff like that. Because there's a certain type of investor, right? When you don't go to, if you're gonna make a movie, you just don't go to anybody. Give me money. You go to people who already are invested in that business, right? And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing more of a group of investors. This sort of last bit, people who invest in video games, and people you can go to get that money.
And it would be so difficult when I think about it. It'd be like, hey, you go ask for a loan. Well, when do video games take years to make, and depending on what your starting point is and stuff. And it's going to be like, well, when are you going to be able to start paying back that loan and negotiating terms and all this interest? And what if the game you make never doesn't sell as well then you can't start paying back that loan. I kind of think of, there's been a couple studios, but I think the biggest one is Studio 38, our favorite I guess failed studio, because I think about they seem to have been in kind of a similar situation, but in terms of like, you have somebody who made millions of dollars as like a baseball player, and then it seemed like he got like a loan, like a government funded loan.
Yeah, he got from the state
right?
of Rhode Island, I believe it was.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of other, nitty gritty details in terms of like paybacks and bankruptcy and whatnot involved in that. But I think of it something similar like that, and you can see the red flags with that entire story, because originally they set out to do an MMO, I believe, like the Kingdoms of Amalur was an MMO, but then like the deadline for starting to, hey, you need to start paying back these loans that you took out for the money you took out. What do we do? Well, here's Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning as sort of like a little stopgap for our money woes. Here's some stuff that we finished, make it a single player game and not like an MMO, which my biggest thing when I first played, I'm like, this game feels like an MMO.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's single player, and obviously it didn't work out well for them, even though the game was fine. And and then the house of cards came crumbling down on.
That's another thing. I think is when you go to someone like a bank, you have to explain how you do things,
Mm-hmm.
and we're still, and I think we've gone back to that how to make a better video game show that we did about 4 or 5 months ago, or maybe less than that. You have to explain, okay, because in movies people understand, okay, you do pre-production, you do this, you do that, and then people who know about movies know, okay, this you're going to produce, you're going to need your camera, you're going to go to studios, you're going to do, location shots and this and that. That's one aspect you have to explain. And also throughout all of this, the story is that we often find that reach exceeds grasp.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be a recurring pattern, especially on the side of developers. And people love to support their favorite developers, but that seems to be true. There's always we can always make it this bigger, better. And if you go back to the crowdfunding part that we're talking about, the successful crowdfunders are the ones who say, okay, we have a clear vision, and there's limits to what we can do, and we're gonna stick to those limits. Better to create a good product with what we have than a grand product that doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And I think Kingdoms of Amalur, that entire mess, is sort of an example of that. One, they were chasing a trend, and the MMO trend, and two, like an MMO for like a first time studio thing of project seems like way beyond anybody's grasp, unless you just happen to hire a team of, like, you manage to poach a bunch of like people that have previous experience, I don't know, from Blizzard or something. And then, like, of course, like, in terms of, like, it takes years to develop an MMO. Like, just, do you imagine, like, hey, bank, give me money, and, maybe in 10 years I'll finally put out a product, and maybe, like, we'll start paying back those loans.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way.
No, it doesn't. I mean, BioWare. How did BioWare end up in hands of EA? Was because they wanted to make a Star Wars MMO, and they did, and they broke records for the fastest turnover from subscriber mode to free to play. And it broke records of how expensive it was. At the time when it came out, it was over $100 million. They broke some nice records there, BioWare, but in the end, it didn't work for them. It seems that they've come full circle in a sense.
Yeah.
With Anthem, so we'll see.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's all we have on the subject. If you have any questions, ideas, comments, you can of course always join us here on the Lesson Learned 1 channel. We are playing right now Tyranny from Obsidian, which is a company that has ups and downs in that respect and the way they make games. The history is very fascinating. And we'll be playing that until next week on Friday. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice drops on Steam. So Chapelman, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Chapelman pretty much everywhere. I am Chapelman_Aragon on Twitch and Twitter, but I primarily hang out on YouTube as under just Chapelman. And right now I am doing a playthrough of Dragon Age Inquisition. I usually play sometimes during Thursdays. Probably I just finished completing the ball thing with, like, the queen and saving the queen and stuff. So I'm probably gonna start the Grey Warden subplot, assuming I can get away from, like, having to stop and flirt with everybody.
Well, that's all for us for today. As always, if you'd like to support the program, there are many ways to do so. You can drop bits, you can subscribe, you can follow, and of course join us in our discussions on live chat. Thank you for coming, and as always, we'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.